My parents banned me from their housewarming in a house I bought for them. I walked in anyway, and what happened next left them speechless. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name's Lena Crow. I'm 27, and I work as a nurse in Oregon. I've been on my own since I was 18. My parents, Marcy and Dawn, never had much, and I always felt it was my job to take care of them. Every time they struggled with rent, car payments, or groceries, I helped. I worked overtime, skipped vacations, and told myself it was worth it, because family comes first. After years of saving, I finally did something huge. I bought them a house. Not just any house, a cozy 2-story with a big porch, the kind of place my mom always dreamed of. When I handed them the keys, they cried. My mom hugged me like she'd never let go, and my dad said he'd never forget what I'd done. I thought it was one of the best moments of my life. For a while it was. They moved in, and I felt proud every time I visited. I'd walk through the door and see them happy, and it made every sleepless night worth it. But slowly, things started to change. They stopped inviting me over as much. When friends visited, they talked about their house, never mentioning that I bought it. I brushed it off at first. I didn't need credit. I just wanted them to be comfortable. Then one afternoon, my mom called about their upcoming housewarming party. I was excited, already planning to bring a cake. But the next day, I got a message from her that made my stomach twist. She said, "Lena, it might be better if you skip the party. It's more of a community event, and we don't want any confusion about the house." Confusion? About what? That it was mine. I called her, trying to understand, but she dodged my question. My dad finally said, "It's for appearances, Lena. People might think it's strange if you bought it for us. We just don't want gossip." I hung up the phone and sat in silence. My chest felt tight. I'd given them everything, and somehow, I was the embarrassment. I kept staring at the invitation online, my name missing. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. But after a while, the sadness faded into something colder. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted them to face what they'd done. So I made a quiet decision. I was going to that party. I wasn't going to yell or argue. I was just going to walk into the house I bought, and remind them who they'd turned their backs on. They thought I'd stay away. They were wrong. I grew up in a small blue-collar town where everyone knew everyone's business and money was always tight. My parents, Marcy and Dawn, worked hard when they had jobs, but steady work never seemed to last long. When bills piled up, the lights would flicker, and dinner sometimes meant cereal or toast. I learned early that if I wanted stability, I'd have to make it myself. By the time I was 15, I was bagging groceries after school and saving every dollar I could. My mom called me her little provider. It sounded sweet back then, like a badge of pride. Whenever rent came due or the car broke down, my paycheck disappeared into their hands. They promised to pay me back, but I never asked for it. It felt good to help. I thought that's what family did, look out for each other. In high school, I balanced 2 part-time jobs with classes. I remember doing homework in the break room between shifts, eyes burning from fatigue, but heart full of purpose. When college acceptance letters came, I didn't wait for their support. I already knew there wouldn't be any. I applied for every scholarship and loan I could find, choosing nursing because it meant secure work and decent pay. Through college, my parents called often, not to check in about classes, but because they needed something. A payment missed here, a temporary setback there. I always said yes. It became automatic, like breathing. When my mom's voice turned soft and shaky on the phone, I couldn't say no. I told myself that someday, when I was earning enough, their struggles would finally end. After graduation, I started full-time at a hospital in Portland. It was the first time I'd ever had a steady income and my own apartment. My parents bragged to everyone about their nurse daughter, how proud they were. But pride wasn't the same as gratitude. When people praised them for raising a successful child, they smiled and nodded, as if they'd built me from scratch. They left out the part where I'd been sending them half my paycheck. I kept helping, even when it meant skipping things I wanted, trips with friends, new clothes, days off. I wired them money for overdue bills, groceries, and even emergencies that sounded suspiciously like vacations. My dad once bought a new grill the same week I paid his credit card bill. I pretended not to notice. It was easier that way. Years passed, and helping them became routine. They stopped thanking me. It was expected. I convinced myself that was love, that family didn't keep score. Still, deep down, I sometimes wondered if I was their daughter or their safety net. When I finally started saving for something big, I thought I was doing it for all of us. I didn't realize then that the house I planned to buy, the one meant to give them peace, would be the moment everything between us quietly broke. For years, I lived like someone chasing air, always working, rarely resting. At the hospital, I picked up every extra shift I could. Nights bled into mornings, and my world became a loop of fluorescent lights and the sound of heart monitor. I told everyone I was saving for my future, but the truth was, I was saving for theirs. My parents had never owned a home, and I wanted to give them that stability. It took nearly 5 years of missed weekends and skipped meals to finally see the number in my account that made it possible. I started house hunting quietly, not telling anyone. I didn't want them to know until it was real. I spent my breaks scrolling through listings, tiny apartments, old cottages, fixer-uppers, until one afternoon I found it. A 2-story place on a quiet street outside Portland. White siding, big front windows, a porch swing that looked like it belonged to another lifetime. It felt right. It felt like them. The day I closed on it, I cried alone in my car. Not from exhaustion this time, but from relief. I imagined my mom drinking coffee on that porch, my dad grilling in the backyard. It felt like everything I'd worked for was finally worth something. When I brought them to see it, I told them it was just a showing. They walked through the rooms, marveling at every detail. My dad tapped the walls like he was testing strength. My mom ran her fingers across the kitchen counter. When I handed them the keys, my voice shook as I said, "It's yours." For a moment, there was silence. Then my mom covered her mouth, tears spilling over. My dad hugged me so tightly it hurt. He said, "You've given us a new life." I thought I'd never forget that line. For the first few weeks, everything seemed perfect. They invited me over constantly, cooked dinners, showed me plans for the garden. But slowly, something began to shift. I'd stop by and find neighbors there, talking about their house. My name was never mentioned. When people complimented the place, my parents smiled like proud owners. At first, I didn't care. It was supposed to be theirs, after all. But then it became different. They hosted gatherings and never told me. I found out about barbecues and family dinners through other people. The few times I did visit, they seemed oddly uncomfortable, as if I was an outsider walking through someone else's space. One evening, I noticed the new welcome mat at the door. It said The Crow Home, established 2023. My name wasn't anywhere. The words looked harmless, but they stung. It wasn't the mat itself, it was what it meant. I started realizing that maybe I hadn't given them a gift. Maybe I'd handed over a piece of myself they never planned to give back. It was the first quiet crack in something I thought was unbreakable. The message came on a Thursday evening while I was charting notes at work. A group text lit up my phone. Crow family housewarming, Saturday at 6 p.m. My mom's cheerful tone filled the message, along with a long list of names, neighbors, cousins, old coworkers. But as I scrolled, something felt off. My name wasn't there. Not once. At first, I thought maybe she'd send it to the wrong list. I waited a few minutes, expecting a follow-up. None came. The longer I stared, the more it burned. Finally, I typed back, "Hey Mom, did you forget to add me?" Her reply came fast. "Oh honey, it's more of a community thing. We didn't think you'd want to come. It's mostly older folks and church friends." I reread it twice. My chest tightened. I typed again, slower this time. "It's the housewarming, for the house I bought. Why wouldn't I want to come?" This time, it was my dad who answered. "Lena, don't make it a big deal. People might get the wrong idea if they find out you paid for it. We just want to keep things simple." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The wrong idea? That their daughter worked hard enough to buy them a home? That the only reason they had a house to celebrate was because of me? I wanted to believe I'd misunderstood, but the meaning was clear. They were embarrassed. All those years of double shifts, sleepless nights, every dollar I'd scraped together. Suddenly it was something to hide. I sat there at my desk, staring at the words, feeling something heavy settle inside me. I thought about how proud they looked when I'd handed them the keys, how my dad had promised he'd never forget. I wondered if he'd meant that for the guests too. When my shift ended, I drove past the house, half hoping to see them outside. The windows glowed warmly. Through the blinds, I could make out my mom setting up decorations, my dad laughing with someone on speakerphone. I watched for a minute, unseen, then pulled away. That night, I didn't sleep. Every memory started replaying in my head. Every time I'd said yes to their requests, every time they'd smiled and said I was so good to them. All of it now felt hollow. By morning, the hurt had hardened into something steadier. I didn't want to fight, but I wasn't going to pretend it didn't matter. They wanted a celebration that erased me? Fine. Let them have it. But they'd have to face me too. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. I just circled the date on my calendar, underlined it twice, and whispered to myself, I'll be there. The night before the party, I found myself driving down that familiar street without really meaning to. The closer I got, the slower I went. Through the windshield, the house came into view, bright, alive, and louder than I'd ever seen it. Cars lined the curb, music drifted faintly through the open windows, and the porch lights glowed like a stage waiting for its performance. I pulled over half a block away and sat in the dark. From there, I could see people moving through the living room, setting up tables, hanging string lights across the porch. My chest tightened as I recognized half the furniture, except they weren't mine anymore. The old couch I'd bought them was gone, replaced with something sleeker. A full dining set stood under the lights, and I knew I hadn't paid for that one, at least not intentionally. I unlocked my phone and opened my banking app. Sure enough, there it was, a recent charge at a home goods store. My mom's name on the shared card I'd given her for emergencies. I stared at the number until it blurred. That card was supposed to be for bills or groceries, not champagne glasses and velvet curtains. I rolled down my window a little, letting in the sound of laughter. Two women stood by the mailbox, talking in low voices. One of them said, "Don really did well for himself, huh? Finally settled down." The other laughed softly. "Yeah, about time. That house must have cost a fortune." My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Every word felt like a tiny cut. Don really did well for himself. I wanted to step out, tell them the truth, that every light shining from that house was powered by my sacrifices. But I didn't. I just sat there, feeling the ache turn to something colder. Inside, I saw my dad carrying a tray of glasses, smiling like he'd earned every bit of it. My mom floated behind him, laughing, showing off the place. She looked proud, too proud to admit someone else made it possible. That sight settled it for me. The warmth I'd always felt for them dimmed in a single moment. The breeze carried a mix of music and conversation, and for the first time, it didn't sound like home. It sounded like a lie I'd paid for. I turned off the engine and sat there until the lights inside began to dim, one room at a time. When the laughter faded and the house went quiet, I made my decision. I wasn't going to argue, or plead, or ask for my place back. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that party like I belonged, because I did. No knocking, no warning, no apologies. Let them celebrate. I'd be there, standing in the middle of the truth they tried so hard to hide. The afternoon sun hung low, warm against my skin as I stood in front of the mirror. I didn't dress to impress, just a simple navy blouse, black jeans, hair tied back. No makeup, no jewelry, no mask. I wanted to look like myself, nothing more. There was no plan to cause chaos, no script. I only wanted to stand in the place I'd paid for and remind them, quietly, who I was. The drive was short but heavy. Every streetlight seemed to hold its breath as I passed. When I turned onto their block, the house was already buzzing. Balloons tied to the mailbox, cars filling the driveway, laughter spilling out the windows. For a second, I sat there watching, my fingers drumming against the steering wheel. Then I took a deep breath, stepped out, and started walking. The closer I got, the clearer the sounds became. Glasses clinking, a burst of music, the low hum of conversation. My shoes crunched on the gravel path I'd paid to have laid. The porch steps creaked under my weight. Someone on the porch, a woman I didn't know, gave me a polite smile before realizing she didn't recognize. I smiled back, small and steady, and reached for the door. It wasn't even locked. Of course it wasn't. Why would they need to lock my house? I pushed it open and stepped inside. The noise cut instantly, like someone had pressed pause. Every face turned toward me, people holding drinks midair, a couple near the table frozen mid-lap. The air thickened with confusion. My mom stood by the kitchen island, a glass of white wine in her hand. My dad was near the window, his smile fading the second he saw me. For a few long seconds, nobody spoke. Only the faint hum of music played somewhere in the background. My mom's face drained of color. The glass in her hand trembled, and I thought for a moment she might drop it. "Lena," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" I looked around slowly. The decorations, the furniture, the people, all of it resting in the space I'd built for them. My eyes met hers, and I felt the last bit of hesitation leave. "I'm checking on my house," I said quietly. A few heads turned sharply at that. Someone near the door let out a soft gasp. My dad's mouth opened, then closed again. My mom blinked fast, searching for words, but none came. I took another step inside, calm, steady, uninvited yet completely at home. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. Every person in that room could feel the truth before anyone spoke another word. The room felt split in half, one side frozen in disbelief, the other pretending nothing was wrong. A few guests exchanged glances, unsure whether to look at me or at my parents. My mom's lips trembled before she forced a smile, the kind you wear when you're caught but trying to save face. "Sweetheart," she started, voice shaking, "this really isn't the time. We can talk later." She moved toward me quickly, one hand outstretched, the other still holding her half-empty glass. I didn't move. The moment she tried to guide me toward the door, I stepped back. "This is my house," I said quietly, but my words carried through the silence like a bell. "The deed's in my name. Every wall, every window, every inch of it, I paid for." The crowd began to murmur, whispers darting from one guest to another. Someone near the back said, "Wait, what?" My mom's face turned red, her smile cracking. Lena, please, she whispered, the calm slipping. You're embarrassing yourself. I tilted my head. Am I? Because last week, I covered the property taxes again. Remember that bill you accidentally forgot? The county sent it to me. Funny how my name's still on everything you claim as yours. The tension hit like a storm. My dad's jaw clenched. He slammed his glass down on the counter, liquid splashing onto the marble. You think money gives you the right to humiliate us? After everything we did for you? We deserved this house after raising you. I turned to face him, steady and cold. You didn't raise me, Dad. I raised all of us. Gasps rippled through the guests. My mom's hand flew to her chest. My dad's face darkened, veins standing out in his neck. Around us, people started shifting uncomfortably, pretending to look at their drinks, at the floor, anywhere but at us. You think working a few extra hours makes you better than your parents? He spat. You wouldn't even have that job if it weren't for... For what? I cut in, my voice firm. For me scraping together tuition while you maxed out credit cards? For me paying off your debts before I could buy my own car? A thick silence followed. My mom's eyes glistened, but not with guilt, more with panic. She looked at the guests, her smile brittle. Everyone, please, let's step outside. But no one moved. They wanted to hear the rest. The mask had cracked too wide to hide behind. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only they could hear. All I ever wanted was for you to be proud of me. Instead, you turned my gift into your lie. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of the ceiling fan filled the room, spinning slowly above a family that had just come undone. The moment the words left my mouth, the room broke apart. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Guests set their glasses down on any surface they could find and started edging toward the door, their shoes tapping softly against the hardwood floor. The air felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. A few people murmured quiet apologies as they passed me, some touching my arm briefly, others avoiding my eyes. Within minutes, the living room that had been full of laughter was nearly empty. Only my parents and a few stray voices remained. The decorations looked ridiculous now, balloons sagging, a banner crooked over the doorway. My mom stood near the counter, her face blotchy from tears and anger. My dad leaned against the wall, jaw tight, staring at the floor like if he didn't move, this would all disappear. You really couldn't wait, could you? My mom said finally, her voice low but sharp. You just had to ruin this. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. I looked at her, calm but tired. You embarrassed yourselves when you forgot who helped you. Her mouth opened, then closed again. My dad still didn't speak. The silence stretched between us until it felt like another person in the room, thick, cold, impossible to ignore. I walked over to the kitchen drawer, the one where I used to keep a spare key. They'd told me months ago it had gone missing. I pulled the handle, and there it was sitting right on top. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand. Seems you found it after all, I said quietly. Neither of them replied. My mom's breathing grew uneven, her fingers twisting the hem of her blouse. My dad finally looked up, his expression unreadable. I thought he might say something, maybe an apology, maybe another excuse, but nothing came. Just silence. I slipped the key into my pocket and took one last look around the room. The walls I'd paid for, the furniture I hadn't chosen, the faces that used to feel like home. It didn't look like my gift anymore. It looked like a stranger's house filled with borrowed pride. I'll give you until the end of the month to find somewhere else, I said, steady and quiet. After that, I'm selling it. My mom's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I would, I said simply. No shouting, no crying, no slamming doors. I turned, walked toward the exit, and opened it slowly. Cool air rushed in from outside, carrying the faint sounds of the neighborhood. A dog barking, laughter from a nearby yard, the ordinary world moving on. I didn't look back. My steps were even, my heartbeat calm. The door clicked softly behind me, and that sound, small and final, was the only goodbye I needed. A month later, I drove down that same quiet street again. The leaves had started to turn, scattered gold and red across the pavement. When the house came into view, I almost didn't recognize it. The driveway was packed with boxes, a moving truck parked at the curb. A couple stood on the porch, talking with a realtor, smiling the way people do when they're just beginning. The windows were open, curtains fluttering in the breeze. The banner and lights were gone, replaced with fresh paint and the sound of new voices. It looked lighter somehow, like the weight that used to hang over it had finally lifted. I pulled over for a moment, watching as the man lifted a chair through the doorway and the woman followed, laughing. They didn't notice me, and I didn't expect them to. It wasn't my place anymore. When I'd sold the house, I didn't even hesitate. The papers were signed in a quiet office with no emotions left to drain. My parents hadn't said a word since that night. No calls, no messages, nothing. It was strange at first, the silence. I'd spent my whole life answering to their needs, waiting for their approval. Now there was just space, wide, empty, and peaceful. I thought maybe I'd feel angry, but I didn't. What settled inside me wasn't hate, just understanding. Some people don't know how to love without taking. I'd spent years trying to earn their affection with effort, with sacrifice, with things that should have come freely. Letting them go wasn't revenge, it was survival. I sat there in my car, engine idling, and watched as the new owners brought out a little girl. She ran across the yard, chasing after a plastic ball, her laughter bright against the crisp air. For a moment, I imagined my younger self standing in that same spot, dreaming of a family that felt warm and whole. Maybe this house would finally get that. I rolled the window down and let the autumn air wash over me. The smell of cut grass and fresh paint filled the car. My heart didn't ache anymore. It felt quiet, balanced, like something heavy had finally been set down. I didn't need to go back inside to say goodbye. That chapter had already closed. I wasn't the daughter who bought houses anymore. I was just Lena, someone who had learned when enough was enough. Before pulling away, I glanced one last time at the porch. The sunlight hit the windows just right, scattering through the glass like it was blessing something new. I smiled to myself, a small, private smile that no one else would ever see. For the first time in my life, the peace I felt didn't depend on anyone else. It was mine alone. The day I moved into my new place, the air felt different, lighter, untouched. The condo wasn't big, but it was mine in every way that mattered. No one else's name on the lease, no one waiting to claim what I'd earned. Just quiet rooms, sunlit windows, and a small balcony that overlooked the city. I spent the first night there surrounded by unopened boxes and silence, the kind that doesn't ache anymore. I chose simple things for the space, soft gray walls, a secondhand couch, a kitchen table small enough for one. Every item had purpose, nothing more, nothing less. When I placed the last box on the counter, I realized how strange it felt to settle somewhere without strings attached. No one to please, no one to rescue. Just me and the steady hum of a life that finally belonged to itself. Among the few things I brought from the old house was a single framed photo. It showed my parents standing on the porch the day I gave them the keys, smiling, holding each other, full of joy that at the time I thought was shared. I set it on a shelf, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. That moment wasn't about what I lost. It was about what I learned. Sometimes lessons don't come from kindness. Sometimes they arrive wrapped in disappointment. Looking at that picture now, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt clarity. That house had never been my home. It was a mirror reflecting what I needed to see. I'd spent years building foundations for other people, thinking that love meant sacrifice. But a structure built without respect will always crumble, no matter how strong the walls. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the city move below, buses groaning down the street, people laughing as they hurried past, a world that kept turning no matter what I'd left behind. For once, I didn't feel like I was missing out. I wasn't running to fix anyone's life or fill someone else's void. I was standing still, exactly where I belonged. As evening came, the golden light stretched across the floor, catching the photo frame and scattering faint reflections on the wall. I traced my finger over the glass and whispered to myself, I bought them a home. They taught me I needed to build boundaries first. It wasn't anger anymore, it was understanding. The difference between giving and giving away too much. Between love that nurtures and love that drains. I turned off the light and walked to the balcony. The air was cool, carrying the smell of rain from somewhere distant. Below, the city lights blinked like quiet promises. I leaned on the railing, breathing in freedom that didn't depend on anyone's approval. For the first time, the space I stood in didn't feel borrowed or earned. It simply felt right. Finally, after everything, I was home. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away, or should I have given my parents another chance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories like this.